Hello friends, good morning all of you. Welcome to my channel and please subscribe to my channel for new videos. And today we are going to discuss about the structure of hippocampus. So what are the cells we can identify inside the hippocampus? So before going to explore the structure of hippocampus, we need to just revise the previous terms what we have discussed earlier under the hippocampal formation. So coming to the hippocampal formation, so what is the hippocampal formation? It comprises of the indusium, grecium, and longitudinal striae, medial and lateral longitudinal striae, gyrus fasciolaris, dentate gyrus, and the hippocampus. Okay, hippocampus, and last at the small part of the uncus as well. So, can we identify the parts what I have mentioned in this picture? So, first, as we all know that indusium, grecium is a gray matter which is present above the corpus callosum, a thin sheet of gray matter which is present the corpus callosum. That is about the indusium grecium. Whereas the next one what we have discussed is the medial and lateral longitudinal striae. I'm going to discuss about it in a few minutes. The next one is the gyrus fasciolaris. So the gyrus fasciolaris is the upward extension of this dentate gyrus. Upward extension of this dentate gyrus, that is gyrus fasciolaris. Where other gyrus which we can identify just below this fornix, this is nothing but the dentate gyrus. Okay, this is dentate gyrus. And next one is the hippocampus. So hippocampus that I am going to mention in a next slide. So here we can identify the hippocampal formation. Hippocampal formation belongs to archipallial cortex, means the 10% of the cortex is the archicortex or archipallial cortex. 90% of cortex is called as neocortex. Okay, so the hippocampal formation belongs to archipallial cortex and develops along the inferomedial surface of cerebral hemisphere and following the outer lip of the C-shaped choroidal fissure. We can identify, yesterday in the previous class I have discussed about the choroidal fissure which is present at the lateral surface of this fornix. So this fissure which I am showing you is nothing but the choroidal fissure. Okay, then backward growth of the corpus callosum. In the next slide I will show you. So this backward growth of the corpus callosum. So the backward growth of corpus callosum invades the upper part of the hippocampal formation. Okay, invades the upper part of hippocampal formation and separates the latter into indusium grecium above, and then septum pellucidum. So here you can see the septum pellucidum below. So the indusium grecium is present above, septum pellucidum is present below. Okay, then eventually the hippocampal formation becomes vestigial in the upper part. It is vestigial in the upper part, but in the lower part it grows. Okay, so lower part it grows, and then it is growing prominently downwards and forwards, from the it is extending into the temporal lobe, to form in the form of the dentate gyrus and the hippocampus. So let me show you this. So here you can identify the temporal lobe. How this dentate gyrus, it is extending into the temporal lobe, Okay, and then so in this picture I'm showing you. See here. So the dentate gyrus which is extending into the temporal lobe and separating the temporal lobe in two areas. Anteriorly we can identify uncinate gyrus. Okay, the tail of the dentate gyrus which is extending into the temporal lobe and it is separating the temporal lobe into two areas. Anteriorly we can identify uncinate gyrus, and posteriorly we can identify intralimbic gyrus. I am showing you with my pointer. Okay, so anterior uncinate gyrus, posteriorly intralimbic gyrus. Okay, so that is about the dentate gyrus. Okay, now the hippocampus is produced by the complex infoldings of the dentate gyrus, cornu ammonis, and subiculum. Remember, listen carefully. The hippocampus exactly it is produced by the complex infoldings of dentate gyrus, cornu ammonis, and subiculum. Now, you may get a question like, what is this? Already we have seen the dentate gyrus, and now the cornu ammonis. Cornu ammonis is an area which is present between the dentate gyrus and the subiculum. Dentate gyrus and subiculum. Let me show you this. So here you can see as the cornu ammonis means the Egyptian deity, the name is called as Ammon, and his horns like this. Okay, the invading inside. Okay, the invaginates inside. In the same way, the dentate gyrus invades into the temporal lobe and forms the hippocampal formation and forms the hippocampus. So let me show you that. Here you can see that. So here you can see the subiculum, and this is the dentate gyrus. So here it is invaginating inside. Okay, the C-shaped part. This is nothing but the cornu ammonis. Cornu ammonis. So the area which is present between the dentate gyrus and the subiculum, the area is called as cornu ammonis. Okay, so it is a shape. So the dentate gyrus, cornu ammonis, and the subiculum, these three, they will come under the hippocampal formation. Okay, so already we have discussed about the dentate gyrus, and now I will show you the subiculum. It is a transition zone which is present between the neocortex and the allocortex. Neocortex are archipallial cortex. Archipallial cortex means the 10% of cortex. So this is the small 10% of cortex, and the neocortex is 90% cortex. So this subiculum is a transition zone which is present between the neocortex above, and then below you can identify the archipallial cortex. Okay, so these things you remember. Yeah, let us see the structure of dentate gyrus. So far, we have discussed about in the hippocampal formation. First, we have seen the dentate gyrus, then we can identify cornu ammonis, then after that you can see the subiculum. Then coming to the dentate gyrus. So it is consisting of a trilaminar layers. Three layers of that. From outside to inside, first one we can identify the molecular layer. Can you find this? Three layers you can identify in the dentate gyrus. So the outer one is the molecular layer. So the middle one is granular layer. Okay, middle one is granular layer, and inner one is the polymorphous layer. The yellow color one is nothing but the polymorphous layer. So the dendrites of neurons of the granular layer, this yellow color one, it is receiving input from entorhinal area. Can you find this here? Entorhinal area is nothing but it is also called as parahippocampal gyrus. Okay, let us see that. Here you can see this is nothing but parahippocampal gyrus. From this parahippocampal gyrus or entorhinal area, the connections which are extending and reaching to the granular layer, the dendrites of the neurons of granular layer receives input from the parahippocampal gyrus. So here we are just taking this small part of it, the dentate gyrus, and going to see. Yeah, what we're discussing is the middle layer, the granular layer of the dentate gyrus, the neurons which are receiving input from entorhinal area or the parahippocampal gyrus where via perforant pathway, and then the axons of the granular neurons of dentate gyrus make synapse with the mossy fibers. Here you can identify the mossy fibers with the apical dendrites of the pyramidal cells of the cornu ammonis. You just remember about this dentate gyrus middle layer. Okay, one set of neurons, they are connecting with the entorhinal area. Another set of neurons, they are connecting with the apical dendrites of the cornu. Then outline of the dentate gyrus is semilunar in section, semilunar and coronal section, with the convexity directed to the molecular layer. Let me show you that. Here you can see that. So convexity, it is approximate to the molecular layer of the cornu ammonis. Concavity, concavity or hilum towards the cornu ammonis. So the convexity directed to the molecular layer, and then the concavity, it is approximate to the hilum towards the cornu ammonis. This part is called as cornu ammonis. Okay. The dentate gyrus serves as an input station of hippocampal formation. Then moving to the next part is the cornu ammonis. So first we have discussed about this dentate gyrus, three layers, you remember, outside to inside, molecular, then granular, inside is polymorphous layer. Okay, then coming to the cornu ammonis of the hippocampus, although basically it is trilaminar and it is subdivided into further sections. So the outside we can identify the axons of the pyramidal cells of the middle layer of the cornu ammonis. Here you can identify the pyramidal cell layer. So the cell bodies are present here, the axons which are extending outside and covers the ventricular surface of the hippocampus and forms the alveus. So mostly by the efferent fibers from the axons of pyramidal cells. The pyramidal cells which we are seeing over here, they are nothing but the efferents. Efferent means the output fibers from the axons of pyramidal cells of cornu ammonis. Then a few axon collaterals re-enter the hippocampus. The next one is the stratum oriens. Stratum oriens, which is traversed by axons and basal dendrites of the pyramidal cells, recurrent axon collaterals, and by the commissural fibers. Let me show you. First one is here, the dentate gyrus connections I am showing you. Another connection, it is from the pyramidal cell layer, which is connecting to the middle layer of the dentate gyrus. And here you can see the axons of the pyramidal cell layers of the cornu ammonis, which is forming the alveus. So far we have been discussing about the stratum oriens. Stratum oriens, which is traversed by the axons and the basal dendrites of pyramidal cells. Here you can identify the pyramidal cells, and apex, which is projecting towards the inner layer, and strictly we can also say that towards the convexity of the dentate gyrus, and the base part which is projecting towards the inside the molecular layer of the cornu ammonis. So from the base of the pyramidal cells, you can identify the basal dendrites and recurrent axon collaterals by the commissural fibers. Here you can identify the commissural fibers. Okay, so that is about a few basket cells also we can identify in the stratum oriens, means the layer of the cornu ammonis. The outside layer is just below the alveus. You can identify stratum oriens. Then below to this one, you can identify stratum pyramidalis. So what we have discussed, in the outside layer we have seen the axons only. Then in the stratum oriens we have seen the basal dendrites, and also we have discussed about the basket cells, and also have seen the commissural fibers. Okay, just moving down and going to the next layer is the stratum pyramidalis. Stratum pyramidalis, it is consisting of 10 to 30 rows of pyramidal cells. 10 to 30 rows of pyramidal cells. The base of the pyramidal cells is directed towards the alveus. Okay, towards the alveus, and the apex is projecting towards the molecular layer, outer molecular layer. Then the axons arise from the center of the base and form the alveus, and the fimbriae. So which we can identify the axons which are extending from the center of the base, they are forming the alveus. That's already we have discussed. The axons of the pyramidal cells of the Carnoammonis, they are forming the alveus. They are surrounding the ventricular surface of the hippocampus. They are called as alveus. Then the basal dendrites receives commissural fibers from the identical regions of the opposite hippocampus. It is receiving the commissural fibers from the identical area, the same area on the other side. Okay. Then whereas the apical dendrites receives the commissural fibers from the non-identical regions. Commissural fibers from the non-identical regions. Whereas the basal dendrites, they are receiving commissural fibers with the same size, with the identical regions of opposite side, whereas from the apical dendrites, it is receiving communication from the commissural fibers of non-identical area. This the basic thing you have to remember. Okay. Then in addition to the apical dendrites, receive afferent fibers from entorhinal area also. Here you can identify neurons also coming from the parahippocampal gyrus or entorhinal area. They are going to communicate with the apical dendrites. And also they connect with the neighboring pyramidal cells. Okay, they also connect with the neighboring pyramidal cells. The pyramidal cells are excitatory in function. Okay, next layer is stratum radiatum, stratum lacunomolecular. They are less important, but these two layers you have to remember. So the outside layer is first alveus, you remember. Next layer we have discussed about stratum orients, then the pyramidal layer. Okay, then coming to the organization of the pyramidal cells of hippocampus. Organization of the pyramidal cells of hippocampus. Coming to this organization, yes, the pyramidal cells of Carnoammonis. Okay, the pyramidal cells of Carnoammonis are subdivided into three areas. Three areas or the fields according to the size, packing density, and according to the fibers connections. Okay, they are CA1, CA2, and CA3. CA1 means Carnoammonis 1, CA2 means Carnoammonis 2, CA3 means Carnoammonis 3. Okay, so the CA1 is continuous with the subiculum. Can you find the CA1 over here? So the Carnoammonis 1 is continuous with the subiculum. Whereas CA3 faces the hilum of dentate gyrus. And CA2, it is intervenes between CA3 and CA1. Got it? So the apical dendrites of CA3, apical dendrites means the pyramidal cell layer. It is having the apex which is projecting towards the molecular layer. So from the apex, we can identify the apical dendrites of the CA3, which are mainly receiving the axons of granule cells of dentate gyrus through mossy fibers. So the axons contribute fibers to the fimbria and the fornix. So the fimbria, already have discussed about the fimbria, the converging. So the white matter of the hippocampus, which is surrounding the ventricular surface of the hippocampus, it is going to converge. That converging part is called as the fimbria. And the fornix means the efferent connections of the hippocampus. It is called as the fornix. Some of the collaterals from the axons of CA3 make synapses with the dendrites of CA1. So that axons, they are called as Schaeffer's collaterals. Then CA1 is continuous with the subiculum. What happens to the CA2? CA2, it is acting like association fibers between CA3 and CA1. So CA2, the fibers with which connections they are connecting, with which neurons they are connecting, still it is not known. Okay, so it is not clear. So what we know is CA3 is communicating with the dentate gyrus granular layer. CA1 is continuous with the subiculum. Okay, so that is the end of this structure of hippocampus. Thank you, dear students. In the next class, we are going to discuss about the hippocampus, hippocampal formation, and the memory we are going to discuss, and also the main outflow of limbic system. Thank you, students. See you soon. Bye.